Okay, uh, welcome everyone to Kenya Data Platform User Group. Today we are continuing with our series, which started with TypeScript, learning TypeScript, which our good presenter Dennis Ashira has been taking us through. So, I know there is a previous series of TypeScript. I think Dennis is going to share on the chat in case you're new, but in case you have been with us, we have our user group. Also, a link will be shared on the chat for our LinkedIn and our Meetup page. You can connect with us there to watch out for upcoming sessions. But today we are going to learn how we can use Azure Cosmos DB SDK in a TypeScript stroke JavaScript framework known as Express. So Dennis is going to walk us through this, and um, we're going to learn how we can integrate our favorite database, that is Cosmos DB, with Express. My name is Kevin, um, the founder of Kenya Data Platform, and with us we have other leads. I think they are going to talk at the end of the call. But for now, I'm going to call Dennis to walk us through today's session. Dennis, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I'm thrilled to be part of this. My name is Dennis Washira, and welcome again to Kenya Data Platform User Group. And we are continuing with our series, which is TypeScript 101 series. And today's session is all about working with backend. So TypeScript and JavaScript have a backend framework called Express, which is used to build backend applications for web application. And I hope we shall have a conversational session, and I hope you learn something out of it. And before we proceed, it's always our tradition to have a code of conduct, which is treat everyone with respect and kind and empathy, and use an inclusive language when maybe making a comment or asking a question. And also constructive feedbacks makes everyone better. So if you are new to this series, my name is Dennis Washira. I'm a computer science student from Kirinyaga University. Also a community lead at the Kenya Data Platform user group. And my social is LinkedIn, Dennis Washira, Twitter or X, Dennis Washira _. And you can always view the playlist of this series on my YouTube channel, which is at Code with Dennis, Code with Dennis. And what we learn today, it will be a simple setup of an Express API. So an API is an application programming interface, and JavaScript and TypeScript offers a backend framework, which is Express. And some key things we shall learn today, it will be how to configure the TypeScript, the Cosmos DB SDK. Also, we prepare the environment for our project. Then we do current operation, which is creating an item, reading that item, updating and deleting, and also other features like validations. And the simple setup of this project will be we install the dependencies, which is if you have not installed TypeScript, also you install the Express library, then the Cosmos DB SDK. We will connect to Cosmos DB from Azure. Then finally we configure TypeScript, which is on we configure the tsconfig JSON and for strict typing. Then after that, we'll now do the real programming, like the CRUD operation. We want to create an API that is able to create or to post something on our database, read that items from our database, able to manipulate that data, and also to delete these items from our database. And as we implement that, we'll also run some input validation using commonly known library, which is ZOD, where after you define the schema, you create the ZOD schema for data validation. Then we implement the validation middleware, and finally some error handling to handle the validations errors gracefully. And finally, we'll be able to run and test our API, which will start the Express server, test the endpoint, debug any errors we will have, and also fix the issues we'll be having on our project. And some real world examples of use cases of building an API. We have some, you can build an e-commerce where you want to can manage product catalogs, contact management system, and also an IoT application. And today the slides were so few, so we won't jump into the demo and try to make this an application come to life. So let me go back now to my Azure so that we can speed up this. This is my Azure account. We said if you don't have an Azure account, you need you can try the Cosmos DB for free, or if you're a student, you can always claim your credits using your school ID. So let me go first to this resource, which is now Azure Cosmos DB, and create a database account. So that's what we said the first thing. So let me create a database account here as quick as possible. We will focus on just the native API, which is Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL. Once the page is opened, we just need to select some bunch of options. For today's workload for this account is just for, I can choose development and testing, the subscription. Then I don't want to create a new resource group. Let me reuse some resource group that I had created earlier. Then the account name of this account now. So this is NoSQL. It can be anything. So this is the name of your account, which will be used to access to append on your REST API endpoint. So NoSQL Express let me just account NoSQL Express API account. Then I want to deploy this on Central US. It's always advisable if you are building this to production, just choose a location that is near you to avoid latency when accessing this. Then for others, I will just leave as default, and I'll go ahead and review and create that resource, which is now the Cosmos DB for NoSQL account. So as is loading, we need to set up our API. So our API is saying it's an application programming interface, and we will be using Express JS, which is you go over to this expressjs.com. That's the official documentation of Express, which is fast and OP, new needed minimalistic web framework for Node.js. It is so simple while working with it. If you all go over to the docs, then installing, you just need to use this command here, which is npm install express. And with that, now you can be able to build this then over on this next page. This is a simple setup on how you can create an arrow around endpoint. So which is just an endpoint that is getting a message which is arrow world. Let me create a folder now and open it with VS Code. So I'm creating a new folder on desktop. I will call it Express TypeScript API. And then open it with VS Code. Open with VS Code. Once opened, so first thing we need a package JSON so that we can be able to manage our libraries. So let me open my terminal on this project. Just a minute as it loads. We need a package JSON, so it's pnpm init. Oh, just a mistake. Aid, so it's pnpm init y. Npm enpm Hey, what's happening with my terminal here? Just a minute. I want to initialize a package JSON on my project. It's pnpm init without the fragment. Yeah, once that we have created our package JSON file, we now want to install some various dependencies. I just saw them at once. So pnpm add the first library I want to install is the Cosmos DB SDK. So we said its name is at Azure / Cosmos. Then the next library I want to install it's our env file, which is now the .env library .env. The third library I want to install. It's zoned, so it's zoned is used for input validation when working with an API, so that you can make sure every input you are passing to the database it's correctly typed with the correct data type, so zoned. And I think those three libraries are okay to work with. So let me add those three libraries. And then we'll install some dev dependencies also, which is the types for Node and also the TSX for read purposes of our project. As that goes on, we want now to have our folder structuring here. And the first thing I want to create is a source folder. Once we create the source folder, I want to have now the entry point of our API. So the index file. So let me create now the index.ts file. If you remember from our previous project, we end a config file where we'll be having our configuration to communicate with or to create a connection with our Cosmos DB in Azure. So let me create another file, which is a config .ts file. I can see our dependencies have been installed successfully. We need to install some dev dependencies also. Let me clear the console. PNPM, these are dev dependencies, so we need to add this fragment there, dash D, then and the first dev dependencies I want to install is the types for Node. Then TSX. And since I've installed TypeScript globally, I don't need to install TypeScript again here for compiling purposes. Then I think that's the two dev dependencies we need to work with that. Then after this, we need a tsconfig file. So you can generate one with command, but also you can, I want to just to copy a configuration file from another project just to save time. So let me copy this configuration file, which is now the compiler option, which we want our code to be transpiled, the options we want to use when transpiling our project. So it's just a simple, the target, the module, the root directory, the list, and the strict, and also the include and exclude. Then if we go over to our packages on, you can see we have now the Cosmos SDK.env and SOD. Then the dev dependencies, we have the types for Node and also the TSX. And also finally, what we want to install again is this our Express API, which we are building today. And the way we saw on the documentation, you just need to install Express as a normal package. So PNPM and Express. Let's see whether our account was created successfully. Yes, our database account was provisioned successfully, and we will now use this account to create a database and also to create a container on this database, and also have some items on this account. So let me go over to this key. So key is where you access your endpoint, and also the API keys will be able to authenticate to you on this account. So I want to use this primary connection, or you can just use the key and then the URL. So let me go back to the project. So under my project, you need also env file. So let me create .env file, and the first endpoint I want on this env file, it's our Cosmos DB endpoint. And where do you get that? So this is our Cosmos DB endpoint. So copy this URL, go back to your env file, then the Cosmos DB endpoint there. So the first variable we want is Cosmos DB endpoint, which is the one we have copied from our Azure. Then the next variable we need is our key. So the key, it's like a password to authenticate us on that account. So Azure Cosmos DB key. Then the third one, it's our the Cosmos DB, the database which we'll be using. So Cosmos DB database. For now, we have not created that database, but we'll create that later. So let me copy the endpoint, which is this, add it there, NoSQL, then the key. So let me use the primary key, this, copy this key, go back to your VS Code, go back to your VS Code, and that key there. And we want to build a task manager project. So the name of database I want to associate with the project, which is now a task manager. DB. Then with that, we are good now to start configuring our database on this config.ts file. And the first thing you need to configure, we need to create an instance of our database in the Cosmos DB. So the first thing I want to import or to write on this code here is we want to import the classes or the function we need to use from our Cosmos SDK. And the first function we want to use is this called partition key. We have this partition key version. So definition version is used to define the partition key of your container. Then we want to have the partition key guide. I will be able to see how to use these functions. Then the third one is the database from our Cosmos DB. Then we can have the client, the Cosmos client, which is we instantiate a new connection from this Cosmos client. Then on this Cosmos SDK, we can also get the containers. Then the last one, we have some Cosmos DB diagnostic level, error response. So let me copy all the function we'll be using from this SDK. Those ones there. Then we can go ahead now to create our instance. So I want to use some popular design pattern, which is called singleton, which singleton means creating an instance, making sure like it is only instantiated once. So it's mostly used when creating instances of database connection to make sure like you are only creating one instance of connection of that database to avoid some errors. So the first variable I want to create is the client. So this client will be of type this Cosmos client. Then database will be this database from our Cosmos DB. So database of type this database from our Cosmos DB. Then finally, the container. So the container, let me give it as a good name so that you can differentiate from others. So our task manager. So we want to create now a task container, like the table in this database. So it's task, a container of this container from our Azure. Then from this, I want to create an environment variable, an environment file, which is used to configure the configuration of our database. So en and v dot ts. So it's different from the env file. So it's just a normal file, but with bunch of configuration. So it's used to load variables like configuration objects for your all settings in the database. And in this env file, I want to use the .env file. So I need to import the .env from .env. Then I want to import also the zone. So Z from our zone library. So we use this to validate our variables. Then to use now the .env, we need now the config function from our .env. Then we need now to define some environment schemas for our connection to the database. So const env schema, which we use now our Z validator. With this Z, we can get the object, and this object is a function which accepts a bunch of the inputs. So, and the first thing we need to set is the node server configuration. So the node server configuration which is now just node environment. So we want to make sure we are passing the correct the node environment, whether it's production or development, and it's node env. So node env, then for colon z dot enum. I want to create an enum to have these files here. So we want to have our enum here, so which is z dot enum. I want to have some the two environment, which is now development, production, and I want to set it by default to be a development. Then the next configuration is our database endpoint. So let me copy this code here, which is now the Cosmos DB endpoint, which is now we want to make sure like the endpoint is provided, and we want to make sure it's of data type string. Then the next validation I want to make is the key. So the primary key we used. So this key, I want also to be of data type this string, and we are validating this using our zoned library. Then finally is our database name. The database name is this one here. So Cosmos DB database name, which is now required. This a message will be logged into our console when we do not pass the database name, or if the database name is not of data type string. Then we want now to pass the to pass and validate our environment. So we want to export this, so we can be able to use this. So export const, which is now the env schema. We want to pass the env file from this one. So I don't know why I'm getting an error. So expected of these are semicolon there. This should be outside because we are exporting this schema. Let me adjust something here. I want to make sure it's in caps, so the production and development. By default, we want to make sure we are using the development environment. Then now we want our configuration below here. So const config this configuration, we want to pass the environment from our env, which is now env dot node env. So whatever we'll be passing here, if we don't pass the development environment, will be the one passed by default. Then our Cosmos configuration, Cosmos configuration, which is also an object. Then this Cosmos DB, we need an endpoint. So let me go with what Copilot is suggesting here. So we need the endpoint. We are getting the endpoint from our env, which is now this environment. So this Azure Cosmos DB endpoint there. Then our Cosmos DB key, and finally the database name, and finally let me just call it database, then the container. So the container containers, which is now our container, which is tasks, and I rename it with tasks containers. Task container for readability purposes. I need a comma there, then a bracket, a curly braces there to close our configuration there. So this configuration, we'll use it on another file. So we need to also export this configuration. So export default this configuration. And with this now, we have environmental variables for Cosmos DB being configured well, and we can use this on our config file to create now an instance or connection to our database. So let's come back here, and we need now to have a function to create or to initialize Cosmos DB connection. So I want it to be an async function. Async function. Then I can call it any name. So I want it to call it initialize Cosmos DB. Cosmos DB. It's a function. This function returns a promise. So a promise. So this promise is of a generic type void. So I don't want to return anything. Then on this function, I want to use a try catch method block to make sure I'm catching any errors, or in case like we have any errors, we'll be able to use our catch block to catch our errors. So our catch block. And inside our try, we want now to create a new instance of our Cosmos client. So this client, now we said we want to use a singleton design pattern. So this client, we want to make sure like we are instantiating the connection once. So this client here, this client, we want to instantiate a new connection from our Cosmos client. This Cosmos client expects the argument, which is now the endpoint, the key, and some diagnostic levels. So endpoint, the endpoint, we are getting this endpoint from our env file, which we have exported here. So we can use now this config and get this endpoint here. So our config, then config, config. So config from our .env, this one. So config dot cosmos dot our endpoint there. Then our key, the same. So it's a config dot cosmos dot key. So this key is from this env here. So this key here. Then some diagnostic levels. So the levels, I want to use the diagnostic, this diagnostic method from this function from our SDK here. So the diagnostic, we want to pass the env file. Then if that does not is not available, we need to have that one there as the info. Then once we create our client there, we instantiate our client. So I don't know why we have an error. So node env does not exist in this Cosmos. So let's see what we have on our config. We have the env. So node is just a typo here. So this should be node env. Yeah, that one. And I think our error should go now. Yes. Finally, what we need to do also after we create an instance, this is the instance we are creating a Cosmos instance here. Then after creating the instance, we need also to create now the database, or create create a database. If we don't have one, we get the database. If we don't want, we don't have one in our account, we create one. So create a new database or get a database. And how do we do this? So we do this by const. We return an object. Where do we get the database? This database, I wanted to rename it to DB. And what are we doing? So we want to await what are we awaiting? So we are awaiting the database. So the client, once we instantiate this, we create a new connection or we create an instance, we want to await this client. So this client here, client, then dot. So this client get these functions there. We can access these databases from this instantiation. So databases and these databases, we have a function which is create if not exist. So if we don't have our database, we want to create one, and we use this create if not exist. Then the name of database, we want to give this ID, which is the ID we did give on our config file. This database name here, with the name we are getting from our environments, which is this task manager. So let me go back there, then config dot cosmos dot the database name, whichever we are passing there. Then I can have a console log to, or I need to return the database here. So once we create this database, we return, we assign it to this DB there. Then I can just have a console log to indicate like the database was created. So a console log, the database, we want to get the name of that database was initialized. Then after creating the database, we need also to initialize a container. So a container, it's like a table in an SQL database. But since we are working with an NoSQL, we want to create now a new container. And how do we create a new container? It's the same thing. It's a const. We want to have this, the container, which was a task. It was tasks container. Container. This container, we want to await something so that we can be able to create our container. And task container, I want to await a function. So this function, we have not created the function to create a container. So let me just call that add that function here, and we implement it just below our connection function. And when we create the container, I just want to console log a message like the Cosmos DB was initially successfully. And finally, this is our try catch. So we need a catch block there. So catch block, which is we want to pass any error. Any error that is being displayed, we want to catch it and also to return that error there. So this error, I want to simplify it by having a function to handle any error. So depending on the type of error that is coming in, that is being catched on our function. So then we need to close this function here. And with that, we have, don't worry with this, let's create this function here to create a container. So just below our function, we need now this function here. So let me copy some code here to speed up. So we want to create a container. So this async function, we are creating a container which is a return type of promise, which is now the container from our Cosmos DB, this one here. Then this container, we need to have some definition. So this container needs to have an ID. So this ID we are getting from containers, which is now our name tasks. Then the partition key, we want to have path, which is now our special. The partition key is the unique identifier of each item in our container, which is now the ID. Then the version of this, we want to use the version 2, and the kind of partition we want is a partition key kind, which has a hash method. Then after that, we want to have another try inside our function here, the try catch. This try catch, we want to have our container, we await the database, the containers. If that container does not exist, we call this container definition and create the container with these container definitions, which we have here. Then after that, we have a console log. We console log the container ID. So I don't want this code here. I don't know why we have so many errors in our code. So let me figure out. So we want a try catch. So this try catch, we need to close this first here. This function, we have not also closed this here. Yeah, so I think our errors has gone. Let's remove this. So we have this task. Let me see where config Cosmos containers, then task. So from our config here, so this container, so it's tasks, not tasks. That's why you are getting the error there. And you can see the error is gone. This Cosmos function we have not created. So let me create that function as fast as possible. It's just a function to handle our errors well and to make sure like we are getting the correct error. So the Cosmos error, we are passing the error, whichever error is coming from our function like this. If we pass that error, we want to loop through and to check if the error is the instance of rest of error. We want to get the message and console log that. If the error is an instance of error response, we want to display that error there. And if it's error of an instance of a both error, we want to get that. So this is just a way of doing a cleaner code and also to make sure you are getting the correct error message. Then finally, we want a getter function. So a getter function is used to get our containers in our database to make sure we now can be able to use the container well in our function, in our project. And how do we do a getter function? So a getter function, it's just a getter function which I defined here. Then the getter function, it's of you want to return type of a container, and if that container does not exist, you want to throw an error. Then you want to return the task containers. And I don't know why we are getting an error with these task containers. Let me see my code here. So we are initializing, cannot find task containers. Did you mean task container? I think it's typo error. Task container. It should be task containers. Let me see on the ENV. It's task container. Why do we have this error? So debugging is part of coding. So do not panic when you get some errors. So task container, tasks container await create task. So this create task, we are getting the container definition, then task container. So cannot find task containers. Did you mean tasks? Why? These are task container there, or this one. So we had a typo here. So the task container. And I think now our configuration to connect to our database is done. And we are ready to create a connection of this. Remember, these are configuration. We need to export these functions here so that you can be able to use this initialization, the get containers, and also handle errors function. So the initialization, we will be able to use it on our index, so to create a connection, and the get task containers, we'll be able to use it on our service to connect to our container. Then the Cosmos errors, we'll be able to use it on our try catch block to display the messages or errors we get in our code. And now we can get started building our API. So our API, I want to borrow a simple and popular coding structure, which is now the MVC. So I want to have a service, view, and a controller in our function. So the first thing I want to create is our model or the schema of our table, of our a task manager we want to create. So under this source folder, let me create a folder, a file there, which is task dot model dot ts. So this now it defines how how the data or the data we want to, the data type of our task we want to create on our database. And we want to do this by the help of our validator, which is zone validator. So import z from zod. Then our task, I just want to have only 3 columns on our, or the key on our task item. So export const, then our task schema. So remember, we are building a task manager. So this task schema, we want to validate it with our Z. So then we get this object function. Then our schema, we need to have like 3 keys, which is the first, our task can have a title. This title, it's of data type string. So z dot string, just to have some the length. So we want our to make sure our title have a minimum of 1 character and a maximum of 100 characters. Then a description. So the description also, which is a string, and also I don't want to give. We can make it also of length 1 or to 1000 length. Then we can make it optional. So with this optional function, you don't need to want the description, then a boolean in our task. So to tell like or to indicate the task is done or not done. So it's complete. We use the zod, the boolean, which is also, I don't want to make it optional, but I want to make a default. So if we don't include the complete key, the value, we want to assign it a default value, which is a false. And with that, I think our task schema is done. So let's close this, close that. Then we shall be also getting a response from our database or from our end API. So let me create also a response schema. Response schema. This schema will be also validated by zone and object. This schema, I only need the status code, which is a number, then the message, which is also a string. A string. With that, let me close this. Then we need now to define our task type. So how do we define our task type? So we export this type, export type, and then task. So this task, we want it to invert our type of this schema. So we are exporting our type or the interface of our task project or object. We want to invert it with the task schema. And then also the same as for response schema. So export the type response. We want to infer the type of this response there. So the just explanation of what is happening here. We have created a task schema. So the task schema is validated by our zoned validator library. Then we want to have a task, the type of our task. So this type, we are inferring it directly from our task schema using this type of. Then with this, I think our model is done, and we can have now our service. The service will be able now to use this model and connect to our the service is responsible for interacting with the database. So let me create a new file here, which is task dot service dot ts task dot ts. So in this file, this is where now I implement some services to connect to our database, whether we are querying, whether we are creating, whether we are updating something. So this task service will be responsible for doing this. And the first thing I want to get is just a get task service. So get tasks service. Get task service. I want to use now export keyword, then our function export cost get task task service. So this service I want it to be an async function so that we can await some response from our database. So async as a sync function, a sync function. It's an arrow function, so we need to add that. Then open our curly braces. Then it's always to use try catch block to make sure you are catching any errors. So try catch, then open the curly braces. Then the first thing we need is to get our container. So anytime you are accessing the database, you want to get the container. So this const, we need to get the task container. So task container this container we want now to use our function from our config. So remember we end this function this get container, our getter function. So get container. So that's what I want to use here. So get container from our config file. This one here we have important and function there. It's a function. So once we get the container, we can now be able to query or to query our database or the container. And how do we do this? So we use this function here, or I want to declare a variable which is now query spec. This query spec, we want now to write a code to query or select all items from our container in our Cosmos DB function or the database. And this function or the query message, let me use whatever GPT is giving here. And I think we are querying this, we are writing now an SQL kind of query, which is now select all from our task. So remember our container, it's task. Once you query from this, let me close that. And this query, we want now to use it on our task container. So we want now get the resources from our container. So you want to await the task container, this one, then the items we query. We have this query. This query gets some params. So these params is whatever you have defined here. We are selecting all the tasks from our task container, and we want to fetch all. Then once we fetch all, we want to return those the resources there. And if we have any error, let's catch the errors on our catch block. So catch, and remember we end a function to handle our errors. So whatever I want to do, it's return, then call our function to handle our errors. So handle, so this function here from our config. So handle, then pass the error there. Then we need to close that. And our errors is gone. This query spec needs to be typed. And what can we do to do this? With this, we have this query, SQL query function from our Cosmos DB, which is called SQL query spec. So if I get this from our Cosmos DB SDK, this one, we'll be able to type this query spec and make sure everything is working good. That's the first service. So let me quickly create now the controller of this service to make sure like we are getting, we are utilizing this get task service. On our SRC, let me create another file, which is tasks dot controller dot ts. So task, the controller is now where also we have some functionalities, and now it's the one now the functionality that is between the routes and the services. And the first thing I want to do it's now to have a function to get these the tasks from our task service. So we want to use this service on our controller to get the all task from our container. And we do this by having this get all task function. So it's an export const get all task task. Then it's an async function also, which is an arrow function. Then we need some implementation there. So I want to get all tasks. And how do I want to do this? So I want to store all the tasks from on this variable post tasks, and this task I want to await. What am I awaiting? So I'm awaiting this service, get task service, to go to our database and query the task and return those resources there. So on our controller, I want to await that service. So get task service from our service here. So get task service from our, so it's a function. We need to do that. Then with that, we can now return our task there. But in our service, we have not fully typed our function here. So let's do some typing. We have this function, which is get the service to get tasks, and it's an async. So function, it's an async function, remember? So it returns some promise here. So this promise returns a data type of generic, generics, and this generics it gets some two return types, whether the tasks or null. So, and these tasks, remember we created the model here. So this task type here. So I want to use that task here. So the promise can return the tasks from our model, this type here, and these tasks can be array. So I want them to return as an array. So I want to indicate that as array, or we use the union symbol to make sure like our function, it's either the service returns the task as an array or null. Then when we come back on our controller, we also need to type this function also. So this get function, it has some response. So the response we are getting, we need now to type it from a response from our Express library, which is this response here, response from our Express. We need to get a response from Express, I don't know. We need now to import this response, and then after getting this task, we need to have an if condition. We don't want just to return the task. We want to check something here. So if the tasks are equals to what? Null. Remember, our service is returning null or task, the array of task. So if the task are is equals to null and or, so or task the length of this array to be 0, we are sure like there are no tasks in our function, in our this task. So we just need to return now some message there, which is now res.status. We can have the code, which is 400, to make sure like the status of this. Then we need to JSON to make sure like we are indicating like we have no task being gotten from our container. Then if this is not true, that means we have some tasks in our function. So else here, we want to return now the task JSON format. So this error, the expression is not callable. So we need to import this response from our Express library. So import response from Express. We have not. Let's confirm whether our JSON, our library installed our Express. So Express is installed, but we are getting some errors from our database, from our library, which is could not find the declaration, or we need to install some types for our Express. So p npm and these are dev dependency when adding some types. So and types /express. So while that is being created, so we have our controller get task function, and we can now use this on our route. So on the source folder, we need now also another file, which is now our route. So our route will make our work easier when navigating. Like we want a route to get tasks, or maybe put or update or delete some tasks. So route dot tasks, so task dot routes dot ts. So we will have 4 routes in our route file, which is now planned operation. We are getting the task. We are either posting a task in our container, and also we are getting one task using by ID, then delete. So on our task route, we need to have this function here. So we need to import our Express framework from our Express. Then using this Express, we can create a route. So router, so const router, we want to get it from Express dot. So on our Express framework, we have this now router. Then it's a function. So with this now function, router function, we can create route from this router in our Express. Then the first router we want to get to create, it's getting all the tasks. Like we want to get all tasks, which is now a get function. So like this get maybe slash tasks. So this is what now we intend to do. Then how do we do this? We use this now variable router. So router, and then dot, we get the get method, which is now used to get or retrieve tasks or items from a database. So dot get, this get accept the get function as two arguments. The first argument is the path and also the address. So the first thing we want to do is the path. So this path, I want this to be just slash tasks, task, then our callback function. So the callback function is whatever we want to do whenever we hit this endpoint. So comma, this function, we need now this endpoint to have a request and a response. So any endpoint has a request. So it's requesting something from the user and also responding something from it's also responding something whenever it gets a request. So request, then on this inside here, we want now to get our to call our controller, this controller to get our items there. So we want to get that now. So get all tasks from our controller, this controller function here. So let me do this and we import that successfully. And this is a function, and this function, you can see it expects one argument, which is just the response. So we want to get the response from our API, which is this one here. So we need to close this. Once we have done that, since we are not requesting something from the user, we can just have an underscore there or just the name request and everything is okay. So we have our first route, which is now task, and we are ready to test this route here, and we can test this on our index. So our index is our entry point. Our entry point to our API. So we need also to, so our entry point, we need now to create a server and also to call our routes, this route in our index there. And the first thing also we want to have in our express or the entry point is the express server. So we need to have express from express then once we have that express, we need now a function to start our server because any framework or any backend, it needs to listen to a port. So we need now a function to create a server in our machine. So async function, which is now, we can call it any name. So start server function. Then this function, we want to create a new app from our express. So const app. Then we are creating that from our express library here, which is now the function. So let me remove that. So we are creating a new app from our express library, which is now the express function. So this app can pass, or we can use it to now to start the function, to start our server, to pass some middlewares and also do some other libraries. So with this now our app. So app dot. The first thing I want to pass on our app is a JSON. So we want to make sure our app is accept a JSON from our frontend. So app.use, then express.json. So we want to make sure it accepts some JSON file data. Then once we do that, we need to have a default route. So app.get. This is a default route, so which is this here, the slash. So it's like the index of our app. So this function, we need to have now our is just responding something. So we just want to send some message or a message there, just a welcome message to indicate this an API. So let me just customize that, which is now just welcome to our Express API. Then once we do that, we want also to initialize our database now. Remember, we already created our database. Then we need now to initialize this database here. So this initialize. So in our app, in our index, we want now to await that initialization. So await, then initialization. So initialization from our config, this. So this is what it's connecting to database. So we want to make sure before we start our server, we have initialized and connected to our database successfully. Once we do that, we need now to listen our app on a certain port. So app dot listen. This listen function accept two params, which is now the port. So I want to listen my app on this port 5000, just a callback message, which is just a console log message. So which is console.log, and just a message to indicate that a server is running on port 5000. Then once we have our start server, we need now to call this server so that it can be open. And I think everything is set up. So when we have our env, so it's configuration, then we have the configuration of our database, then we have a service. So the service, we are getting the tasks. Then this task is being used by our controller to get our tasks. Once we do that, our route, we only have one route, which is tasks, get all tasks. Then finally, in our index, we are creating our server. We want to listen it on our port 5000, and we have a default route, which is this just a response message, sending a message which is just welcome to our API. Then on our package.json, we need a script now to start our server. And we do this by doing this. So let me just edit this. So we need to have this as dev. Then we remember we installed TSX. So we want to use TSX, then watch what. So our entry point is /src src/index.ts. So whenever now we call this we run this script, this is our entry point, it will call this function, initialize our database, then listen to this port. And let's test this if everything is okay. So the script is pnpm run dev. So let's see whether our initialization, the server or the API we run successfully. So whatever is happening, we are getting this function, creating our app, making sure it accepts some JSON, initializing Cosmos DB, then we are listening to this port 5000. So let's wait and see whether we'll get some response from our API. Yes, we can see now a database has been created, which is database task manager DB. Then tasks container is ready for a use. Then the Cosmos DB has initialized, and also our API is listening on port 5000. And to to test this, we need an API tester. So we have this extension called REST client. So if you go over to extension and type this, we have this extension here, which is now an extension to test your endpoint, which is now just send or cancel or run when you are on VS Code. There are other like Postman, Rapid API client. So I want to use this REST client extension so that I don't want to move out of my VS Code. And we do this by having a file in our root directory and name it app.http. So with this HTTP, we can now create some endpoint or test our endpoint there. And we do this by having some 3 hashtags. Then you write the function you want. So our first endpoint or the index is the default route, which is get function. So how do we write that function? So we use the keyword get, then the port, whatever the port we are listening. So this is so it's HTTP HTTP :// this API. So these are our default route. And now we have this message here with the indication like we can test our endpoint here. So let me zoom out a little bit, minimize this, and if I click this, I get a response. So the response is welcome to TypeScript API. That means our default route, it's working well, this one. So we need now to use our route here, which is this route here. This route, we have not exported this route. We need to export so that we can use it on our index. And how do we do this? We want to export this route. So export default router. Once we export this and come back in our index, we can call those routes there now. So which is, we now want to use our route. So our app, we want it to use, so dot use, then the path. So the path is, I want this to be just /API, then whatever we are getting, then the route. So comma our router. So router, this router here. So task router. So once we now hit this endpoint API, then our task route this /task, we should now be able to get task of the task from our database. So let me now write the second endpoint here. So 3, 4 hashtags. Then it's also a get function, a get endpoint. Then we remember in our index it's /API. So it's /API, then slash on our route, which is /tasks. So /tasks. With this now, so let's we assume everything is okay. We should get some task from our endpoint. So if we click that endpoint, we are getting this message, which is no task found. Why? If we go back to our database or Explorer, we can confirm like we don't have any tasks. So overview. So overview this, we have this task database here, the task manager and the container. And we go to that database, you can confirm that we don't have any task, and that's why on our endpoint we are getting that response. You can see like we don't have any item, and that's why you are getting this response like no task found, because on our endpoint, our service, it's querying our container and returning whatever it's getting. So once it gets that, it comes back on our controller. So the controller, we are checking two things, whether it's returning null or the length of our task is 0. So that means if the length of our this task is 0, that means there are no tasks in our container. That's why we are getting this message. So that's the first route on our API, and I can see the time is really running. I don't know whether we'll be able to create other service as fast as possible. So let me do this as fast as possible. An endpoint to add a task in our function. So let me do this as fast as possible. Just one route also. We have this and task. So this task here, our service here, I want to have the second service, which is now and task. So whatever we are doing, it's getting the service. We are typing our task with a task type. Then the promise is our task there. Then we do a try catch. So the try catch, first thing we need to get the container. So the container, and once we get the container, we want to store our response. Then we await the task container, then we create that item. I know we did this on our previous session, so it's not hard to understand. So we are passing our create, we are calling our create function, typing it with a task type, then passing our task. Then we are doing some, if there is no response, there's failed to task, and this service, we want to use it on our hand task controller. So let's go back to our controller and have that controller there. So we have this now controller. The controller is to end task. This task gets a request and a response. So any endpoint or an API, so we work with response and a request. So the request is whatever the endpoint is requesting from the user. Then the response is whatever the endpoint is giving back to the user. So we are waiting for the body, the JSON. Then you want to create a unique ID with this function there. Then we are calling our and task service from our service file, which is this now. Then the task with ID. So logged and defined. We have some errors with this ID here. It's complete. Let me confirm something. So we have this and service, then argument of type. It's locked, Boolean, cancel. The promise, get reader, it's not assignable to string. Locked, Boolean, it's not assignable to this. So we are not having this ID on our model. So let's add that in our model here. So we need to have an ID, which is also ID of string, which is just a unique random numbers. So let's go back to our function, and we hope everything will be okay. So and service, so argument of type this undefined, cancel, dot id string or undefined. So const with id. So let's come first of all finish creating the endpoint, then come back to debug this error message there. So once we create, we have this controller. We didn't also have to have a router. So to make sure like we have the route to add task in our route. So let me come here. So I use this router again, dot. We are now posting something to our database. So we now to use the post. So this post, I want now to be on the same path, which is /tasks, then comma, then our function, our controller to do the adding or creating the task, which is now res the request, then the controller, which is and task from our controller, this and task. This controller expects the request and the response. So we have this, the request and the response, then we need to close this, have some comma there. And we need also a parenthesis. With that, we also having some errors there. An argument of type response any number is not assignable to parameter request. We need to start with the request, then the response. So request, then response. Then I think the error should let's do this. New task, await, then task with ID. Let's see where we are doing some errors on our model. So the model, we have an ID, which of type string, then this. Then we are doing this by argument block. So IDs of string, title, which is string, is complete Boolean, and the description, which is type. Let's see what Copilot will do with this error. Task. This not gonna solve our error there. I think the error is coming from this and task service. We have our task, which is this task there, which is of promise task. Then the task container, we create a task from this task, then we are getting a response. Once we do that, we come on our controller, then we want to ensure we have an ID on our task. I think we can do this before adding an ID because the Cosmos DB has some default way of adding an ID on any item that is created. So let me pass this on our and task service. and see we are getting an error because on our model we have this ID. So let's comment that out and see whether our error. We are still getting the error. If you are in the corridor, can be able to help me debug this. I might be making an error that I'm not noticing. Kevin. Ryan, are you there?
Yeah, can you move on there? We see. What did you say?
I'm trying to add this task here, and I'm getting this error like the argument of a readable string, which is now this. Now it's not assignable to a parameter, which means we don't have the ID on our schema.
Okay.
This one. Yeah.
I think you can try fixing with Copilot and see.
Okay, let me see. The compiler is suggesting to fix this. You need to ensure the error is still there. I think our model, so let me do this. I don't need to include the ID on our model because the Cosmos DB will create, will have a default ID on each item is being created on the container. Then on our service, we are adding, yes.
I think you're passing one of your values is null. So I'm not sure whether it's the ID or something, but there's something which has null value. That's why that error is happening.
But I don't think I can see like I'm spreading the task so that I can be able to add the ID. Then I pass the task with ID here. So once I pass this, the ID,
So you're generating your ID from data or something.
yes, I'm generating the ID from task must have a title or complete. So I think the const description does not exist in the type. The title. So that means our data, or we are passing some variables which are null and defined. But I don't think so the request we need the response, then we need a try, which is const requesting the body. Then you want to generate a unique ID from date and it's in our task. Then this task, the new task, we are awaiting the task service and we are passing the task. And if you have not created the new task, you want to have a message. If that is okay, you want to respond a JSON with the new task. Then in our route, we're also getting some request error there. So let's see what pilot is suggesting. No. But I don't know what's happening, but everything is okay, whatever we are doing here from our model. Because of the interest of time, I don't think we'll continue debugging, but I'll demonstrate the final product or the final API I created earlier. So let me stop this server and show you the final API that I had created earlier. So this is the same API you are creating. We end our files, the folder structuring. We have the service. We all have all the 5 service. We have a service to earn task. Then we have a service to get task, then update task, then get task by ID, then delete service. Then those service we are using on our controller also to update the task, to get the task, to get task by ID. And finally, on our route, we have now the 5 routes, which is now we are getting all the tasks. We are creating the new task. We are updating the new task, and we are getting the task by ID. So we are getting a specific task using the ID. Then we are deleting a task using the ID in our params. Then finally, is the final project. So let me, because I don't have this account, let me use the account we were using. So this one here. Let me use this account here and start the server. So pnpm run dev. Let's make sure everything is working. So we can see now we have our database, we have the container, and if we go over now to our file, which is now app.http, we have all the endpoints to create, to delete, and the first endpoint is this one here, which is to just the default endpoint. Welcome to our API. And the second, we are getting all the task with this endpoint, the get then /API/task. If I click that endpoint, we should be able to get some task from our API. And since we have initialized our database again, that means we don't have any task. Then we have an endpoint to create or create a task on our container, which is this now the post, then the content, which is now application suggestion. So whatever we did here, so this express.json, we are making sure like our API accepts some JSON from our user. So this now the title. So our model, we have only title and the description. So task 1 and task and description. So if I now create this task, you can see we are getting a response here, which is now our response, which has been created on our database. So the task 1, the database, the description, it is task description. And if I want to create another one, I just need to create this maybe to have some differences. I create this, I'm getting another response that our another task has been created. If I now go back to this get task, I should now be able to get some task from our database, which is now an array of tasks, which is the first task we have created, and then the second. Then the third task, the third endpoint, is to update. So we are updating an existing task. If now I have this task, I want to update this name. I can update this task using the unique ID, which is now this ID here, and I pass this on this endpoint, which is task slash the ID and the content, whatever I want to update is the title. So I want to update this task to task updated. And if I send that request, I should get a message which is saying the task not found. Why? So let me copy the ID again. So copy this ID, paste it there, and then send. We are getting a message there. So send request, copy this ID, send again, a task not found. Oh no, so express bad request. I think the put method has an issue. If I want to get that ID, the task by ID, I am passing that here. So let me see whether I get the task. So I don't know whether the task was created. Let me confirm. Let's confirm on our database. So task. But basically, so that's how we create an Express API, a CRUD operation. So we have a full CRUD operation. We are creating the task, getting the task by ID, then deleting the task. And I can see we are 2 hours past. I wish to stop at that point and take some questions before we conclude our session. Any question? So we have this item. Any question up to there? No question or feedback as we wind up? Any question? I think silence means people are okay. So I'll push the code to GitHub so that you can go and exercise with it. And I want to thank you all for showing up for this session. I hope you have learned something new or something from APIs, more especially on Express API, mostly the folder structuring, how you divide your code from service, from the container, then the models, and also the routes. Then you have the entry point. And next week, we'll do the same thing, but now with a different framework, which is Nest. So that will be covered by Kevin. So stay tuned, and I hope you get some insight and also some knowledge on this backend development when it comes to building API with this framework, which is either Express, Honor, or Nest. And with that few remarks, I wish to call the meeting to an end. Unless you have any question, the meeting has ended.